Imagine a future where your burger, the fish on your plate, and even the milk in your breakfast bowl could be powered by insects. No, not a wild dystopian fantasy. This is a real billion-dollar bet taking place in silent warehouses across Europe right now. While most of us recoil at the idea of eating bugs, the continent's food security, climate ambitions, and economic future may hinge on embracing the humble black soldier fly. But can this radical pivot truly disrupt the vast, centuries-old protein industry, or will it collapse under its own weight? Today, we're peeling back the curtain on one of Europe's boldest experiments, investing millions into high-tech insect farms to transform food waste into sustainable protein. The stakes? Nothing less than the future of what we eat, how we compete globally, and who stands to win or lose if the bet fails. Let's journey to Pori, Finland, where a biotech startup called Volare just secured 26 million euros to build what they claim will be the most efficient protein production facility in the world. Their vision: take the mountains of food byproducts Europe currently disposes of and turn it, through the magic of insect alchemy, into high-grade protein, oils, and even fertilizer. Their insect of choice? The unassuming black soldier fly, nature's own bioreactor, as Volare's CEO puts it. It's not just about feeding people directly. This insect protein is poised to revolutionize the animal feed industry, taking aim at fish meal, soy, and even meat, ingredients whose supply chains are not just expensive, but geopolitically fragile. According to the European Commission, the EU produces only about 34% of its own protein concentrates. The rest? Imported, often from regions racked by drought, deforestation, or political instability. With protein demand set to double by 2050, Europe faces an urgent question: adapt or fall behind as prices soar and environmental crises multiply. Volare's bet is more than a moonshot. They've already proven their model at a commercial scale, processing 5,000 tons of food industry waste each year in their Hyvinkää plant. Now, they're thinking bigger, building a flagship facility capable of producing protein equivalent to almost a fifth of Finland's commercial fish catch annually. They've signed long-term deals with aquafeed giants and are already piloting insect-fed rainbow trout in local farms. The goal? 10 plants by 2030 and 3 million tons of CO2 savings every year by 2035. But here's where the story gets complicated. For all the headlines about Europe's protein revolution, lurking beneath the investor optimism are stubborn, sometimes brutal realities. Scaling up insect protein isn't just a technological challenge, it's an economic and cultural minefield. Let's zoom out for a crash course on why insect protein is suddenly the talk of the town, and why it's so controversial. First, the science is everywhere. Insects, especially the black soldier fly, are hyper-efficient at turning food waste into protein. Unlike cows, they don't belch greenhouse gases, need sprawling fields, or demand huge amounts of water. Volare claims its closed-loop process uses up to 30% less energy than traditional protein production, with greenhouse emissions cut by up to 8 times compared to soy. If you're picturing a green utopia, you're not alone. But the promise is only part of the picture. According to Dr. Marion Peters, an economist at the University of Helsinki, insect protein's promise hinges on overcoming cost and cultural barriers to compete with established protein sources. Let's break that down. Economically, most insect protein startups, including Volare, are still heavily reliant on government grants, climate funds, and patient capital. Their facilities are expensive to build, maintain, and scale. EU regulation, particularly Regulation 2017-625, demands strict hygiene, monitoring, and traceability for anything going into the food chain. As Isabelle Dupont, an EU regulatory affairs specialist, puts it, these rules require significant upfront investment in hygiene and traceability, impacting smaller insect producers disproportionately. So, while investors are pouring millions into the sector, the reality is that only the best-funded companies, often backed by big agriculture or deep-pocketed institutional investors, can survive the regulatory gauntlet. Smaller, more innovative players risk being squeezed out. And then there's the elephant, or rather the bug, in the room: consumer acceptance. For all the engineering magic, if people balk at eating insects, or even animal products fed on insects, the revolution could stop dead in its tracks. Dr. Klaus Schmidt, a consumer behavior expert at the University of Bonn, warns, environmental messaging alone won't sway consumers. Taste, texture, and cultural acceptability are paramount. In other words, it doesn't matter how green or efficient the protein is if shoppers won't put it in their carts, or if farmers don't trust it to feed their animals. So, is Europe ready for an insect-powered protein future? The answer is complicated. Let's dig deeper into the conflict at the core of this revolution. The powerful promise of insect protein versus an entrenched reality of cultural resistance, regulatory hurdles, and market economics that don't always add up. Start with the numbers. The European Union, despite its advanced food system, imports nearly 2/3 of its protein concentrates. This leaves it dangerously exposed to shocks. Think the soy bans from South America, or price spikes in fish meal driven by environmental disasters. The supply chain vulnerabilities are real, and they're getting worse as the climate crisis accelerates. Volare and its competitors promise local, resilient, circular solutions. By feeding insects on food waste that would otherwise be landfilled or incinerated, they close the loop, generating protein, oil, and fertilizer all in one system. The flagship Pori plant alone could process volumes that, in protein terms, rival Finland's national fishery. If their model proves successful and scalable, Europe could slash imports, cut emissions, and carve out a leadership role in sustainable ag tech. But none of this is easy. First, the economics are precarious. Insect protein is still significantly more expensive than soy or fish meal on a per-ton basis. Facilities like Volare's require vast capital outlays. This latest round included equity, loans, and public funds just to get one plant off the ground. Every step of the process, from breeding the black soldier flies to hygienizing and extracting the protein, requires energy, labor, and expensive technology. Dr. Emily Carter, a sustainability expert at Imperial College London, cautions. Insect farming's carbon footprint depends heavily on energy sources. Renewable energy is essential to realize its sustainability potential. If plants rely on fossil-based electricity, the environmental benefits shrink rapidly. And the regulatory landscape is daunting. The EU has taken steps to permit and encourage insect protein, particularly for animal feed, but the legal requirements are strict. Producers must guarantee traceability, food safety, and hygiene at levels that can overwhelm smaller operations. Regulatory hurdles slow down market entry, driving consolidation. As John Smith from Feed Vision notes, strategic partnerships are vital for market access, but risk consolidating power among a few large players, potentially stifling innovation. Culturally, the barriers are even harder to measure and to shift. Europeans are some of the world's most reticent consumers when it comes to edible insects, even as pet food and aquaculture make inroads. Decades of experience show it can take a generation or more to shift food norms, even with powerful environmental arguments. Environmental urgency doesn't trump taste or tradition, says Dr. Schmidt. It's not enough to tell people insects are green. You have to make the experience desirable. Any misstep, a food contamination scare, a high-profile regulatory failure, or simply a batch of bad-tasting products, could slow or even reverse acceptance overnight. And then there's animal welfare and environmental concerns within the sector itself. Dr. Ann Mueller, an entomologist, warns, BSFL farming offers waste valorization, but ammonia emissions require careful monitoring and mitigation to prevent environmental damage. At the same time, the industry is evolving fast. As Kees Arts, CEO of Protix, points out, the insect industry is shifting towards specialization, with diverse business models such as full liners, growers, and breeders emerging, influenced by geography, culture, and economics. This could mean greater efficiency, but could also deepen inequality between established giants and struggling newcomers. So, Volare's grand flagship in Pori is not just a factory, it's a microcosm of Europe's high-stakes gamble on food resilience, economic growth, and environmental sustainability. Will millions in funding and cutting-edge tech be enough to overcome a web of economic, regulatory, and psychological obstacles? Or will the shiny promise of insect protein remain just that, a promise outpaced by cheaper, older, better understood sources? As Volare prepares to open its doors and scale up to industrial levels, Europe faces a moment of truth. Can the continent, hailed for its culinary traditions and regulatory caution, truly embrace a food revolution built on bugs? And as the first batches of protein roll off the line, one question looms. Will Europe bite, or will decades of skepticism and inertia turn this grand experiment into a spectacular and expensive misfire? The answer could reshape not only what ends up on our plates, but the future of global food security itself. So, we've reached the moment of truth. Volare's facility is now positioned as a symbol of both ambition and uncertainty, a high-tech answer to Europe's protein woes, but one still surrounded by big questions. What happens next can shape not just what we eat, but how our society thinks about food, sustainability, and even risk itself. Let's peer into the possible futures that could arise from this grand experiment with insect protein. Imagine scenario 1. Insect protein goes mainstream. European consumers, once squeamish about bugs, begin to embrace clever marketing, improved recipes, and a new foodie culture. Supermarkets carry protein bars, meat sauces, and even bakery goods with hidden insect flour. Meanwhile, animal feed manufacturers swap imported soy for local insect meal, dramatically cutting the continent's exposure to global supply chains. It sounds futuristic, but it's plausible. Governments might step in, offering subsidies and harmonizing regulations. As Dr. Marion Peters from the University of Helsinki puts it, if cost barriers fall and regulatory frameworks align, insects could move from novelty to necessity. But not all paths lead to a bug-powered utopia. Scenario 2 remains firmly on the table, the niche trap. Here, insects are confined to trendy pet food and specialty aquaculture. Regulatory tangles and consumer resistance prove stubborn. Costs stay high. A handful of big players like Volare serve a few loyal clients, but the impact on Europe's overall protein independence is minor. The food system's vulnerability to disruption, whether geopolitics or climate shocks, remains unsolved. There's also a third, more nuanced future, the hybrid model. Tech breakthroughs make it possible to blend insect protein with plant-based ingredients, creating hybrid products that taste familiar and are priced competitively. Hybrid burger patties, snack foods, and pasta gain traction among flexitarians and eco-conscious families. This scenario could foster a more robust, flexible protein supply chain, one not reliant on a single source and able to adapt to changing tastes and crises. But every future carries risks. Let's dig into them. One big concern is environmental. Large-scale insect farming sounds green, but there are hidden dangers. According to Dr. Ann Muller, an entomologist with Agriscope, without careful management, ammonia emissions and waste byproducts from insect farms can harm air quality and water systems. In other words, the fix for one problem could create another. Then there's the risk of industry consolidation. John Smith, a feed industry consultant, warns, strategic partnerships can open new markets, but also centralize power among a few major players, stifling smaller innovators. Imagine a handful of mega farms dominating the market, leaving little room for the next Volare to emerge, and perhaps making the system more brittle, not less. And let's not forget regulation. Isabelle Dupont, who tracks EU food law, points out that Regulation 2017-625 puts huge upfront demands on hygiene and traceability. For small entrepreneurs, this can be make or break. Finally, the cultural hurdle. Dr. Klaus Schmidt, an expert in consumer behavior, offers a reality check. Environmental messaging alone won't sway most consumers. Taste, texture, and familiarity are what truly matter. The lesson? No amount of eco-labeling can replace a delicious experience. So, what would it actually take for insect protein to transform Europe's food system? First, the obvious. Cost must come down. Innovations in automation, breeding, and energy use can help. Volare's own factory claims a 30% reduction in energy use, but to compete with cheap soy and fish meal, those savings must keep growing. Second, regulation has to support, not strangle, innovation. Streamlined approval processes, pragmatic safety rules, and incentives for sustainable practices could let more startups experiment and grow. At the same time, transparency is crucial to prevent greenwashing and ensure public trust. Third, the sector needs creative marketing. Instead of selling insects as bug food, brands could focus on hybrid products where insects are invisible, protein-enriched bread, pasta, or snack bars. This lowers the yuck factor while still delivering sustainability benefits. Education is also key. School programs, food tastings, and influencer campaigns can help normalize the idea of insects as food. Countries that have made progress on insect acceptance, like the Netherlands and Finland, often point to generational change and persistent public engagement. But what about you, the viewer? Here's where things get practical. As a consumer, you can shape this story. If you care about climate change or want to future-proof your diet, try hybrid products or recipes where insect protein is blended with familiar ingredients. Many new products are hitting the shelves. Be curious, check the ingredients, and maybe try something new. Even your feedback on taste and texture helps companies refine what they offer. If you're an entrepreneur or student, the field is wide open. The industry needs innovations, not just in farming, but also in food design, packaging, logistics, and communications. From smart farm sensors to recipe development to new business models, the room for impact is enormous. Partnerships between techies, chefs, and scientists can be especially powerful. And if you're a policymaker, your decisions matter. Supporting research, piloting school programs, and funding startup grants can accelerate responsible adoption. Keeping an eye on industry consolidation and ecological risks will help ensure the sector grows safely. A final lesson is this: revolutionary change in our food system is never just about technology. It's about culture, economics, regulation, and above all, trust. The story of Volare's insect facility isn't just about making protein from waste. It's about designing a future food system that works for everyone, not just for investors or early adopters. Let's return to our central question. Will insect protein break through the barriers and become a pillar of Europe's food system, or stay a niche curiosity? The honest answer, for now, is that it could go either way. The technology is real and the environmental benefits are compelling, but success depends on lowering costs, smoothing regulatory kinks, and, perhaps hardest of all, winning people over, one meal at a time. All three future scenarios are still in play, and the outcome depends as much on public attitudes and bold leadership as on engineering marvels. But here's a secret fact that even many insiders miss. Insect protein isn't just a protein replacement. By design, the closed-loop system recycles nutrients that would otherwise be lost forever, meaning it could also unlock entirely new forms of circular agriculture. In the future, your bread or sushi might not just be sustainable, but part of a system that leaves almost no waste behind. So what will it be? A food revolution or a missed opportunity? If you want to shape that future, start now. Share this video, talk about it with friends, try a new product, or even pitch your own crazy idea to a food startup. Change always begins with curiosity and a single bold step. What would you be willing to try if it could help transform the way we feed the world? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to see more deep dives into the future of food, sustainability, and innovation, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share this video with someone who cares